Okay, so hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in such a rainy day. And make sure that you're in the right room. Actually, we have like 2 events today, this morning. One is another conference, and this is a workshop for EMI. I'm going to talk about the definition for EMI in a minute. So there are actually many definitions of EMI. I'm going to talk about some of them. Okay? So make sure that you're in the right talk as well. All right, this is common expressions of classroom English and resources for enhancing language skills for EMI classes. And I'm the speaker, Chester. I'm an assistant professor from the Language Center. I think most of the audience know me. And so I'm a linguist. I'm gonna talk about EMI from a linguist point of view. Okay, and this talk is actually designed for non-native speakers of English. As I see some native speakers of English here. It may be boring to you, but the content may be useful for your students. Okay, so if you're really good at English, I see many English teachers here as well. I think probably speak better English than I do. And some of you are native speakers. So if you find it boring, I can understand, but you can also recommend those resources to your students. Okay, these are some very good resources. And also because most of you are English teachers, I'm gonna do some poll, some survey, but most of you are English teachers, so I want the talk to be interactive. So I'll ask questions. We'll look at data. We're gonna talk about our experience, because I think many of you are more experienced than I am. Okay? And also I try to be research-based. So most of the content from my talk is based on some research. I also have some citations in my slides. So if you're interested in the content, we're going to upload the PowerPoint, and then you can read the citations, read the references. Okay? All right. So let's get started. So, public speaking 101. Always know your audience before you start your talk. All right? So I want to know who you are. Okay? So let's do a show of hands. How many of you are English teachers that you teach English? Okay. Some of you, I think most of you. Okay, thank you. How many of you are teachers who have experience using English to teach subjects other than English? Okay, thank you very much. So again, half of you. How many of you are teachers who plan to use English to teach subjects other than English, but you don't have any experience so far? Okay, none of you. Good. So you all have some experience. That's good. All right, graduate students. You're simply graduate students. Okay. So I was wondering why you would like to come. Can any one of you share? Because this is actually about instruction, right? It's for teachers mostly. I want to know anyone who wants to share. How many of you are graduate students? Can you raise your hand again? Yeah. So why do you want to? Okay. So you plan to become a teacher? Actually, you're a teacher, right? But do you plan to become a teacher after you graduate? Yes, you do. Okay, great. So what about the man in the back? What about you? Apply languages. Okay, great. So I think you're also a graduate student, right? So yeah, why do you come? Okay, great. So what's your major? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So all right. So I think all of you. I hope you can all learn something after this talk. Okay. So others, is there anyone who are none of this? Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. All right. So I have some idea. All right. So now I'm gonna talk about EMI. Okay, as Professor Lai talked about, EMI actually is quite a new term. The concept is not new, right? We used many years ago, people started to teach classes in English, right? The concept is not new, but EMI, the term is new. So that when I first encountered this word, I thought it was a record company. There was a record company. It's EMI, and I thought, well, okay, so we start to talk about classical music in our field. But no, it's actually something else, okay? And I'm going to talk about how we organize and design this workshop, okay? So okay, what is EMI? There are actually different definitions. Okay, so this one is actually the most neutral one and the most popular one recently. So it's English medium instruction. Okay, you use English as a medium, or English mediated instruction. I think these two are most neutral and most common, popular ones recently. But in some literature, in some study, you also see English as the medium of instruction. All right? That means you only use English as the language of instruction. But however, there's also another term is English as a medium of instruction. So that's also a possible way to do EMI. So that's also related to Professor Lai's opening remarks. So can you use other languages in an EM class? So if you're adopting this term, then probably yes. I'm going to talk about it a bit, and I think the speakers in the later talks will talk about it as well. Well, yes, people think you can use other languages and in your EMI class as well. But since this class is about not class. This talk is about how to enhance your English speaking abilities. I'll talk about English most of the time. Okay. All right, and a more rigid definition of EMI is this. I think it's quite a good definition. So the use of the English language to teach academic subjects other than English itself. So in the literature, mostly it's about teaching subjects other than English itself. In countries or just jurisdictions where the first language of the majority of the population is not English. The last part is actually quite important, I think. That's what makes EMI difficult, right? So if you teach a class in English in the United States or in the United Kingdom, that's no problem, right? People don't have to talk about it. Just like you don't talk about how to teach your class in Chinese, because that's quite easy, right? What makes it difficult is that you have to teach a subject that's not English to a group of people who don't speak English as their first language or even the second language. Okay, so that's why it is difficult. All right, I'm going to talk. This whole workshop is going to talk about how can we solve or deal with the problems, the difficulties. Okay. All right. So as I said, I want the talk to be interactive, so everyone should get a piece of handout. So there it's double-sided. So on the first page, you'll see 2020 NTU STMI workshop, common expressions of classroom and resources for enhanced languages for EMI classes, right? So the first question is, what might be the problems and difficulties of EMI classes? We talked about problems. Many of you have experience teaching classes in English. I believe you all encounter some problems. Or you're a student in an EMI class. I believe you all encounter some problems. So I'll give you 1 minute, okay? I'll give you 1 minute. Try to write down or come up with some problems that you have encountered, okay? Or problems that you can think of. All right? 1 minute. Okay. So is there anyone who wants to share like any problems or difficulties you have encountered in the past? Yeah. So actually, Professor Chen mentioned 3 problems, I think. Number 1 is language barrier. Of course, because we don't speak English as our first language, we don't actually speak English that much. Most people in Taiwan don't speak English that much. So that's a barrier. And the second barrier is you're taking the class. So the content should be new to you, right? So the content itself is a barrier. It's actually difficult. And the third problem, I think, is about study skills. Like in Taiwan or in Asia in general, students don't like to ask questions, right? They're afraid of speaking up. They don't want to ask questions. Or some of them will wait until the midterm or exam or final to figure out that they know nothing about the class. Okay, so that's some problem. Any other problems? Do we have some non-native speaker? Yeah, yes. Yeah, I agree. So first of all, the teacher is not a native speaker of English, right? So it may be difficult for you too. You may be familiar with written English. You may be a very good researcher. You publish a lot of research articles, but you may not be so familiar with spoken English, right? And sometimes my students will ask me about a word in English and I don't really know because I don't really use that word that much. And also, I also encountered the problem, like, because I look like Taiwanese, of course, I look like Asian, and students expect you to speak Chinese. And if you don't speak Chinese, they will complain about that. Like, I hope the teacher can speak more Chinese. But I don't think that will happen in classes in which the teacher is a native speaker of English, right? They expect them to speak English, but they will expect Taiwanese teachers to speak more Chinese. All right. Okay. So I think there are a few difficulties mentioned in this study. So in this study, the researchers interview a group of Taiwanese teachers in college who wanted to teach their class in English, who are not English teachers. And then they mentioned these problems. Number one, students have low-level English language ability. So that's one problem. We talked about that. Number two, students have mixed English language ability. Right? Actually, one of the participants who I emailed with, he mentioned that the problem, students have mixed English language ability, especially in school like NTUST. We have students who are really good at English, who are even international students whose first language is probably English. And at the same time, in the same class, we'll have a group of students who don't really know much about English, whose English proficiency is fairly low. So how can you deal with that? Okay? So if you speak Chinese, if you switch to Chinese, there is a group of people who cannot understand you in the class, right? But if you insist on using English, there's another group of students who cannot understand you. So it's a problem. And then your own limited English language ability as a teacher, okay? I also mentioned that. And also, EMI may diminish the quality of the content I try to teach. Some teachers will complain that, well, it's slower. Like, I cannot cover everything that I want to cover if I taught it in Chinese. So that's another problem. And finally, insufficient support for students to develop their English language abilities at my institution. They think that their students' English proficiency is not good enough, so they want their institute to support them. Okay? So in my talk, I'm going to talk about these three things. Like, if your students' level of English is low, or your own English language ability is not that good, or you find you need support for students. Okay, I'm going to talk about these three. Okay, this workshop, we'll start from the language part first. That's my talk. So the most micro part, the core, the micro part of teaching classes in English. And then we're going to move on to presentation and pedagogical skills. So in the next talk, Professor Johansson is going to talk about pedagogical and presentation skills. It's not only about language only. It's also about how can you teach the class, okay? And then we're going to go to a broader scope. We're going to talk about course design and implementation in the afternoon. So in the afternoon, we'll have a lot of college teachers who don't teach English. They teach other subjects to talk about their course design and implementation, their experience of EMI. Okay? So, and then at the very last session, we're going to go back to the presentation skills and the instructional language part, and we're going to watch some videos of EMI, and I'm going to talk about what are the strengths and weaknesses of their teaching. Okay? All right. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about 4 topics. Number 1 is classroom English. Number 2 is methods or techniques for enhancing speaking skills. And number 3 is resources for teachers, and finally resources for students. These sort of are similar. Okay. All right. Classroom instructional English. So according to Joe 2018, classroom English actually have at least four parts. The first part is greeting, just what I did. Good morning, thank you for coming. So these are greetings, easy, okay? The next one is classroom management, okay? Open your textbook and turn to page 100, say, or everyone should get a piece of handout. So these are class management, okay? And then academic English. So like the English used to do academic presentations. It's more specific because it's used in academic context, but it's not as specific as disciplinary English. Like if you teach, say if you teach management, if you teach engineering, then that's discipline English, right? Just like EMI. Like in our discipline, it means English medium instruction. And in other fields, it means something else. Okay? I'm going to talk about these two. Okay. All right, now activity. So this is actually a transcript of a university lecture in English in the United States. So let's take a look at the transcript for a minute, and then you tell me what you see. Okay, let's take a look at this, this transcript. Okay, I'll give you 1 minute, and tell me what you see in this transcript. What's so special about the language that the lecturer used? Okay, 1 minute. Okay, so what do you see? Okay, yeah, so there is a lot of pauses, uncertainty, hesitation, pauses, right? You see here you have now. Sometimes if it's not really well prepared, if it's not well rehearsed, then you have these things, right? Anything else? Can we have someone in the back to share your observation? Anything you observe? Yes, a lot of pauses, redundancy, etc. Yes. Yeah, you have a lot of questions, right? Questions, confirmation. Very good. Confirmation. All right. So anything else? Can we have someone from this part of the audience? Anything you noticed? So it's actually related to what he said, right? So the teacher seems to be thinking while he's speaking, right? So but we actually will all do this. Actually, if you're going to teach a 3-hour class, you have to think while you speak in some moment, okay? At some moment. All right? So this is from a book, actually. It's a research. So it's a research study. So it's from this book, Biber 2006, Universal Language. So the author actually talks about different features of a spoken and written language in universities. So is it more like conversation or a textbook? It's more like conversation. Why? Yeah. So again, repetitions, inconsistency, also questions. All right. So number one. So if you think that your students cannot understand you well, you can think about your style. Your style. Do you talk bookish? Like do you just produce what you read from the textbook, or you try to talk to them? Okay. So when you're giving a lecture, try to talk to your audience. So that's number one lesson, okay? And also you have some loosely connected sequences like this, right? And as I was thinking about how to approach this chapter, I thought, well, I'll type them out and that might help. You might think, well, if you read the transcript, you will think the lecturer is really bad at his job, right? But actually this will buy the speaker some time and also for the students to understand what he's talking about, actually, if used appropriately. Okay? And then also, try to use clauses more. What I mean is, try to use shorter clauses like this. Now, I handed out something that looks like this. Did everyone get one of these? Did you get one of those? The clauses are really short. The structure of the sentence is not really complex. Use easier complex. You can use shorter clauses. These are all produced by native speakers of English. If they have to do it that way, then probably we also have to do it this way, okay? So try to produce shorter clauses, use clauses instead of really complex phrases. And this is an excerpt from the textbook. So as you can see, there's a lot of noun phrases, right? The control environment is defined by the attitudes of the persons in charge of the international control system. You only have is defined in such a long sentence, right? So again, if you think, well, your students cannot really understand your lecture that well, you can think about how you speak, right? Do you speak like a textbook, or do you speak like you're talking to your friend, okay? All right. So again, you will try to engage your audience, like you use questions. So I try to use questions a lot in my talk. And then you use comprehension checks. Is it making sense to you? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Is it clear to you? Or use I, we, you, right? So when you're writing your research paper, probably use third person a lot, but when you're talking, use I, we, you more. Okay? And also, as you all mentioned, you think while you produce your language, so you can use prepositions, you can use pauses, you can use markers like well, so, okay. All right? So that's all fine. Okay? Try to use those markers. Okay? You see here. All right. So we'll skip this part. Okay. What can we learn from this? So number one, try to talk to your students. Okay? Talk to them instead of just read your text. Number two, use shorter, less complex clauses. Be personal and interactive. Okay? You can be really personal. I think. I hope. Let's. You will. Okay? So be personal and interactive. And lastly, repetition, redundancy, and pauses are fine. So don't worry. That's fine. Okay? That's fine. You can be redundant sometimes. You can produce redundant utterances sometimes. Okay? That's helpful actually. All right. Any questions so far? Or any comments, questions? Okay. Okay. Very, very good point. So are you suggesting that I'm speaking too fast? Well, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. So yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So I think that's okay if you speak slower, if you have pauses. Actually, pauses help, in fact. And you can use some fillers like now, well, so. All right? So instead of just read the text, instead of just speak with the same pace. Okay? All right, very good point. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? If not, I'll move on. I'll leave some time for questions and answers, but yeah, we'll move on. So now we're going to talk about some common expressions of classroom English. I think that's simple for you guys and boring for you guys. So we're going to, okay, first of all, if you're a teacher if you're an English teacher or if you're a student, I recommend you this. Or if you want to help your students to improve their English, this is actually a very good resource. Okay, this is called Academic Formulas List. Okay, so these two researchers, they do some research in academic discourse, and they have a list of academic formulas, like phrases, expressions, lexical chunks, etc. Expressions. And then, if you're familiar with those, you can produce more native-like language, and also you can understand the talk better. So I'll show you some of the words. Okay. I'll show you some of the words here. So this is AFL, and there are two parts actually. There is a list for written English, and there's a list for spoken English. Okay. So I'll show you the spoken one. Okay, so spoken one. So you have like something like be able to blah blah blah. By the way, students tend to pronounce it wrong. Like they'll say blah blah blah, but it's actually blah blah blah. Okay, and this is or you know what I mean. You can see trying to figure out. Okay, so you can invite your students to learn these phrases, formulas. And if you're a non-native speaker, you can also try to know them and speak with these expressions. That will make your speech probably more native-like and also understandable. Okay? All right. So as I said, I want to keep the lecture interactive. So please take out your handout again. I need your participation again. So question number 3, okay? Question number 3. What English phrases expressions would you use to achieve the following functions? So these following functions are quite important actually in a class, in an EMI class. So number 1, opening. How do you open a class? Number 2, defining. We all have to define some concepts in a class. Listing. How do you list? You have to present a list of things. Eliciting. How do you invite students to speak? Giving examples, that's simple. Emphasizing, okay? The number 1, closing. You can choose some of them to write your answers on, okay? So you can try to respond to some of the some of them, okay, some of the items. Okay, again, I'll give you 1 minute. Choose one or two and write your response. How would you do that? Okay, how would you do that? What would you say to achieve those functions? And I'm going to show you mine, things that I found in research and also on the internet. Okay. So how do you? Most of you are teachers. So how do you usually open your class? Okay, very great. So greetings, right? Good morning, good afternoon. How are you today? Today we're gonna talk about that's what I do basically. Any other way that you can open your class? So there are many ways to do greetings. Welcome to Math 101. Good morning. And also you can refer to previous class actually. You can do some review. Many of my students like review. Usually they will forget everything they did in the last week. So they need us to help them to review what we had last week, okay? So usually I will do, okay, so in our last class, last week, up to the point, so far, what have we done, okay? So you can refer to previous classes. That's actually very helpful and students like it. And then you can also announce the content. Today we're gonna deal with, today's topic is, and today's class we'll cover and what we're going to do today. It's a very important part because it helps your students to sort of calm down, and then they'll have a frame, they'll have an overall idea about what you're gonna do that day. Of course, sometimes they lose their attention, but their focus, but that will help, okay? Next, defining, so anyone? I'll just show you, okay. Defining, so this is actually quite easy, right? So X is what, X is code, it is known as, maybe defined, it's a type of. So type is actually can be used to define. Okay, we call something, we define something. Okay. So if you have to define things in your class a lot, you can do it these ways. Okay. Listen, this is easy. The first one is first of all. The other one is last. Eliciting. What is X? What does it mean? What do you think about X? Okay, asking questions. This is what non-native speaker teachers do quite often. All right, you ask questions. I try to ask questions. When you ask questions, many things will happen. Okay, so ask questions. Giving examples. Sorry. Go back to questions. So again, if you ask questions, that will solve a lot of problems. Like if you're afraid that your English is not good enough, you cannot make yourself clear, or you're afraid that your students are not good enough in English, again, you ask questions, but of course some of them don't answer your questions, but at least try to ask some questions, okay? Giving examples, okay? For example, such as, this is shown by the following examples. I'll give you an example. Example also help, okay? Sometimes, I would call it the curse of knowledge. Like sometimes we know something so well that we're cursed. We don't know that it's too abstract for others, or it's too difficult for others. So now, if you give an example in your class, that will be really helpful. Okay, and these are the ways that you can give examples. By the way, we'll upload the PowerPoint. So if you need information, don't worry, we'll upload it online. Okay, and emphasizing. Okay, I want to emphasize, I want to highlight, it's important to remember, don't forget that the crucial point is, the essential point is, the fundamental point is. Okay? Closing. So this should be, I'll ask people to share. So closing, how do you usually close a class? Can we have someone from here? Like, I see some teachers here. Like, how do you usually close your class, end your class? That also matters actually. Yes?
That's all for today.
That's all for today. That's a perfect one, classic one. Yeah, that's a classic one. That's all for today. Any other ways to end your class?
I kind of remind them of their homework.
Homework! Yeah, that's also very important. Yeah, homework, assignments, don't forget to do something. We're gonna have a quiz next week, etc. Anything else? Anything else that you do? Okay, so actually there are many ways to close. Usually you can do some recap, like what we did today was, what we tried to do today was, and what we've done so far is, okay, people are forgetful, especially when they are students. Okay, when they are students, people are forgetful. Try to sort of recap a bit, summarize. Let me finish by summarizing. To finish, let's go over the main points. Quick end. So that's all for today. We're gonna leave it for today, and then we'll continue in our next class. Okay. So I think recap are very useful. So try to recap a bit if you have time. Okay, if you have time. Other communicative resources like gestures. Research shows that if you gesture appropriately, that will help your students. Okay? So for example, like if you teach vocabulary with gesture, then your students will understand the vocabulary better. Okay? Because actually some propose that actually language is related to gesture. When we're producing our language, we're actually also producing our gesture. They have the same origin. Okay? So if you can use some gestures, that would be helpful. PowerPoint slides, of course, we all know that. Yeah. Handouts, that's why I have handouts. Okay, that's why I have handouts. And translanguaging. Okay, so that's related to what Professor Lai mentioned in the opening remarks. You can switch to the common first language. Okay, especially when you're teaching a group of homogeneous students, like if they share the same first language, then probably you can switch to the common first language. Okay? All right. And then according to this researcher, I think this is quite a nice quote. Effective lecturing skills are not directly proportional with high linguistic proficiency. And what students care about is actually effective lecturing skills. And that's the topic we're going to talk about in the next talk. But I think that's what I put it here because although this talk is about language, but it's more than language. Okay? So if you can have effective lecturing skills, that can actually help. Okay? If you think your language proficiency is not really high enough, then you can try to improve your lecturing skills. Okay? And we're going to talk about that later, so stay tuned. Okay? All right. So how do you enhance your speaking ability, skills for EMI classes? I believe English teachers all have some tips, etc. So I'll just introduce 3. By the way, any questions so far? Any comments, questions before I move on? No? Okay. How do you enhance your speaking? So usually I always tell my students, think of learning to speak English as learning to play a sport or an instrument. Okay? Don't think of it as learning a subject matter like chemistry or biology. So why do I say so? Because if you think about it, learning to speak a language is just like learning to play a sport or an instrument. When you're learning to play basketball, what do? Do you just memorize rules? No. Do you just watch NBA games? Some of us do, but not really, right? What do you do when you're learning to play a sport? You play. Yeah, you play. You practice. You don't just use your brain. You also have to use your body, your muscles. And research also shows that actually learning to speak a language is also related to your muscles. Okay, there is a researcher a researcher in the Graduate Institute of Linguistics in NTU. He actually studies the bodily basis of language. That is, what muscles do we use when we speak English? Okay, so you can think about it. When you speak language, you actually use a lot of muscles, right? Lips, tongue, your face, your throat, your neck, and even here. I don't really know how to call it here. Probably upper chest, I don't know. So you actually use a lot of muscles here. And also we understand other people by watching their lips move. Right? There's a very famous effect called Mcgregor Effect. This is a video who produced, like, I'll just take off my, so you will see a gesture like and you will see sounds like ba. So what sounds do you guess you will hear? Like you see a gesture like, and you hear sounds like ba. What do you expect to hear? Can you make a guess? You do a ga gesture, but you hear ba. You actually hear ba. The acoustic signals is ba. What do you expect to hear? Can you guess? In Taiwan, mostly it's ga. So although you hear ba, I'll try to probably play it in the afternoon session, but anyway. So usually we have to see people speaking. Now, that's my point. All right? It's bodily related. It's related to your body. We also, when we're learning a language, we have to see others do it bodily. Okay? So try to think of, if you're not a very fluent English speaker or you're a student, then you can try to think of it this way. Okay? All right. So as I said, it's like playing a sport. So you have to play, right? And also, how many of you played tennis or badminton or table tennis? Raise your hand. Any of them? Okay. So you have serving, right? There's a skill called serve, right? There's an action called serve. It's actually a series of actions. Like, how do you learn to serve? Yeah, Percy, I mean, do you do it like step by step, really step by step? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what do we play? Badminton or tennis or badminton? Do we do it like step by step? It's actually a series of actions, right? It's actually a series. I'm really bad at serving, but yeah, you know, it's a series of actions. So you do it in the series, right? In the sequence, right? In steps, right? But when we're learning language, we don't do that. When we're learning language, we learn elements one by one, right? One by one. And that's not really good, actually, for us. So the first one I want to recommend, the first approach that I want to recommend is the lexical approach. What does that mean? That is, you try to understand and produce lexical phrases as chunks. So that's why, if you think back, we talk about chunks. We don't introduce you words. We introduce you chunks. So think of language as chunks instead of words plus grammar. Okay? Think of language as a chunk. So when you're learning English now, from now on, try to think of language. You understand and produce your language chunks. Okay? Chunks like, good morning, how are you? You're familiar with this? Or if I were you. So you don't really understand it as if I, be verb, you. And because it's conditional, it's hypothetical. So if I were you. Of course you can do that, but it's not really effective. Okay? That wouldn't help with your fluency. So try to think of it as if I were you. If I were you. Okay? Think of it as a chunk. Have you ever? That's a chunk. Okay? And also some collocation, strong accent. The speaker has a strong accent. Okay? Strong accent. Or totally convinced. So these two are connected. So learn them together. Okay? Learn them together. So that's what I call the lexical approach. And that's why I recommend this list. Okay? This list. This list will help you learn language, learn English as chunks. Okay? When you produce your language in a class, in the AMI class, try to produce them as chunks. That will help you and your students actually. Right? Because if you speak in chunks, you will stop at the boundaries of the chunks. Then that also helps your students to understand what you're talking about. Okay? So that's the first one. And the second one, I think some of you probably are familiar with it. How many of you have heard of this method, the echo method? Raise your hand. Okay, many of you. Okay. What do you know about it? It's actually quite popular, right? Because Professor Chong even cooperates with like Adi. Okay, they have a YouTube video. So what do you know about it? So what do you do in the echo method? So this is actually invented by a professor in NTU, and her name is Karen Chun. And she invents this method. I'm going to show a video to you later, but what do you know about this method? What do you have to do? So yes, so some of you raised your hands. So yes, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that's a 3-step method. It's actually a technique. So usually people will just listen and repeat, right? And for this method, you have to echo in your mind first before you repeat. Okay, before you repeat. I'm going to show you a clip of her talk. Actually, the talk was given in NTUST as well a few years ago. This is similar to the second method I'm going to talk about, but I think this is quite effective. The effect is quite effective, especially when you're not really that good at English. Okay, so you listen, you echo, and repeat. Okay, you don't just listen and repeat. Okay, you have to listen, echo, and repeat. So there's one more stage, because you have to think about it. Basically, you have to think about it before you repeat the sounds. Okay, all right. So if you're interested in this method, you can also read this article here. Okay, 2017 article. All right. The next one, I use this one more often, so I do this by myself. Like usually I don't have a conversational partner, and I will just do shadowing. Sometimes I talk to myself, and sometimes I do shadowing. Okay, shadowing is very similar to that one, and it's an interpretation practice for interpreters, translators, interpreters. And what you do is it's found beneficial for both listening and speaking. And again, it's similar, very similar. You listen. And if you have a text, you read the text, and you listen again, and you repeat. It's just that you don't have the echo part. You don't have the mental echo part. You just listen and repeat. That's actually more challenging, but it's helpful with your fluency, right? Because you have to, and also concentration. Okay, I usually do this at home. So basically, you just choose one clip, video clip or audio clip, and play it, and then you just after 3 or 4 words, you start to follow it. So you start to repeat it. So that's shadowing. It's very similar to the echo method that Professor Chun just demonstrated, but it's more difficult. It's more challenging. But many studies, as you can see here, many studies actually found this method very useful, especially in terms of improving students' fluency, intonation, and listening comprehension. Okay, so shadowing is also very helpful. All right, so any questions so far? Yeah, we're all good. So I think the lesson here is think of learning a language as learning to play a sport or learning to play a piano. Actually, Professor Chun also used the example of playing an instrument. For example, like if you want to learn to play the guitar or the piano, what do? You don't just read books. You don't just analyze scores, right? You have to play. And when you're learning to play piano, lay people will think, well, it's one's a key, right? But actually, if you look into it, you'll find that actually professional pianists, they will play the music in the series. There's a hierarchy in their hands. So their hand movement, there's a hierarchy. They do it in a series, okay? They don't do it one by one. There's a hierarchy. Just like language, there's a hierarchy, okay? So yeah, so that's basically a lesson here. And in order to achieve that, you can do lexical approach, learn words, learn phrases in chunks, or you can do echo method, just like you're imitating your coach, what your coach do, okay? All right, so no questions, then we'll move on, okay? So resources for teachers. So now, so you all know these resources, common expressions. What else can you have? What resources can you find on the internet? So here are some. I'll show you some. Okay. So first of all, if you're interested in EMI research, you want to know more about it academically, you want to read academic research, academic studies about EMI, then you can go to this website. It's a very good website. They share almost everything from Oxford. So here. So this is in my Oxford research group. It's very comprehensive. They have a very comprehensive list of publications. And then also they show you their presentations online. So you can actually watch their presentations, I think. Yeah, they have videos. They uploaded almost every video they have. So they have some discussion presentations. And also they have some publications. So if you're interested, they have published a few books and several articles. So if you're interested in this topic, you can go to this website, EMI Oxford Research Group. So there are a lot of resources. Okay, they have done very systematic studies about EMI. Okay, my definition of EMI actually comes from this website. Comes from this group. Okay. It's a cross-country, it's an international group. All right, so that's the first one. And the second one is a more local one. That is the Foreign Language Center of National Chenggang University. So they actually have done a lot of research, not only about EMI, but also about CLIO, if you're familiar with this word, Content Language Integrated Learning, so CLIO. So they have quite some publications as well. So they have some books, and they have a journal, and it's all free. Okay, so you can download their books there, but it's in Chinese. Okay, fortunately or unfortunately, it's all in Chinese. And they also have a journal here, so it's all free. So if you want to read their journals, it's about they have a lot of research, and it's all free. So like, for example, how can you incorporate English into a science camp, and how can you use different methods to teach your subject in English. Okay. Although I have to say, this journal or this book is more oriented to primary or secondary teachers. But I think some of the skills are also useful, right? Okay. All right, so these are the resources for EMI research. And if you want to improve your language and teaching skills, these are two very good websites. Number one is Center for Language and Teaching and Learning, University of Washington. They have actually a very good international teaching assistant program. Although you're teachers, or some of you can be TAs actually, so they have a very good resources for international teachers. They even have resources for faculty working with international TAs. That's quite interesting. Okay, so resources for international TAs, and they have a lot, like teaching resources for international TAs, communication resources for international TAs, events for experienced international TAs. Why do I mention this? Because international TAs, they are also non-native speakers of English, and they have to teach their content in English. So they will encounter some similar difficulties as we do, as non-native speaker teachers do. So you can try this. This is quite complete, actually. Some teaching tips and suggestions, etc. Okay? All right. And then some of the content of this talk actually comes also from this online course. So if you're interested in knowing more, you want to learn more about language, the language that you can use in teaching a subject in English, you can go to this one. So it's actually on Coursera. How many of you know Coursera? It's actually an online course website, Coursera. It's also actually in one of our resources. So you can take a look at the second page. It's in the second page. Okay. So there is English for teaching purpose online course, online on Coursera, and it's on demand. So that means it's also free, and you can access to that course anytime you want. And it's offered by a university in Barcelona. This is actually a very good course, especially if you need some language support, okay? Because they mostly talk about language. You know, the linguist chunks they can use, or some strategies that you can use. So if you're interested, it's not really long. It's not a long. It's about only like it's a 4-week course, but the content is only about 3 weeks long. And I learned a lot from this course actually. Okay, and also they offer a lot of resources. Okay, a lot of resources. It's yeah. So if you're interested in knowing more about this topic, go to this course. Okay, it's on Coursera. And then some course observation. So if you want to know how people teach in English, although not EMI, but if you want to know how do people teach your subject in EMI in English, then you can go to these websites like MIT OpenCourseWare. I believe all you know that. Coursera. This is the website that I just mentioned. Okay, so I won't go to it. They even have PE classes actually on this website on MIT OpenCourseWare. It's quite fun. You can see people teach. Teach like diving, and they upload all their handouts and videos on this website. Okay, so you can go to that website. I won't show it one by one. And resources for students. Okay. There are actually many ways to do EMI. In different countries, people do it different way. In some countries, students need to pass a certain language proficiency test in order to take EMI classes, because they think that, well, if you're not good enough in English, you cannot take EMI classes. And in some countries, they will ask students to take 1 year of English classes before they start to take EMI class. But in Taiwan and also in NTUSD, usually we don't have that limit, right? You can just take EMI classes are for everyone almost. Okay, of course we suggest people who are proficient enough to take these classes, but usually we don't set any limits. So if you think your students are not good enough in English, then I recommend them to take our courses. Okay, so these are the courses that we offer that your students, or if you're a student, you can take these courses as well. Okay, for example, English for Science and Technology, Academic Listening and Speaking. These 2 courses are more EAP oriented or ESP oriented. English for academic purposes or English for specific purposes. So you can take these courses to sort of help them to improve their English proficiency. And also we have some advanced courses like Advanced English Communication, Advanced English Reading, or Advanced English for Presentations. These are all very useful courses for students who want to take EMI classes. And then basic English writing, intermediate English writing, or if your students are really that bad, then probably you can go to grammar and rhetoric. Okay? These courses are all helpful, very helpful. Okay? Of course, you can take other courses. I believe that the English teachers in our center are all very good. Okay. All right, and then I have to promote our service, our Foreign Language Learning Studio. I think this is for teachers and students, both teachers and students actually. So we have some faculty consultation. So if you want to talk to foreign like English teachers or native speaker of English, you come to our consultation, and we have some English tutor time. We actually have some tutors here today, and then we have some TED Talk online courses, and they can watch TED Talks and then answer questions, comprehension questions. And then we also have this test called Professional Vocabulary Quotient Credential Tests, and it covers 4 disciplines. And they're all, I think, all subjects that we have in this school, and then they're really useful. I just interviewed one of my students, and he said that this test is really helpful. Those words are really helpful. They can really use those words in their class. Okay, especially for some department, for some majors, they need to use English a lot. Okay, they have to read English textbooks. So these are very good resources for them. Okay, and also this one. These are for language skills. So much of the content is also from this website. This using English for academic purposes for students in higher education. This one. So you have this website. It's quite useful. For example, you wanted listening, and they'll talk about like note taking, exercise. They have structure. They tell you, for example, introducing what phrases you can use, like what chunks you can use to do those things. Okay, giving background information, like as we know, as we have already seen. So these are very useful websites for them as well. Okay, and then this one is from I have this one already. Okay, this University Writing Center. So they have this writing and speaking guides. Again, they're sorted by topics, so you can talk about like conference presentations, deliver a presentation, etc. So if they need more materials, they can watch it. They even have videos and audios. Okay. So they have also online courses again. Okay. Any questions so far? I'll give you 30 seconds. Think about what we have. We'll do a summary before we end the talk. As I said, recap is very important. So think about it if you have any questions, comments for what we have covered so far. And we're gonna summarize what we have in this talk today. Okay? So other students, class, all right. I'll talk about it later. We have a Q&A session, so I'll get back to that later. So what about our content of the talk so far? Any questions or anything that you want to see more? No? Okay. So before I get to the Q&A part, so let's do a summary, okay? So what do you remember about our talk? So at the beginning, what did I talk about? What did I talk about? Do you remember at the beginning? Yeah. Thank you very much. So I talked about the definition of EMI. There are actually many definitions of EMI. Okay, so the most neutral one is English medium instruction, and you can think of EMI as English as the medium of instruction or a medium of instruction. Okay, and also I talked about the design of the workshop. Remember, so this talk is about the smallest part, the micro part of EMI, and then we'll move on to a macro part of EMI in the later talks. Okay, and then I talk about classroom English. Remember, we read the transcript together. We get to know the features of lecture English, and then you know that you have to do it like you're having a conversation with others instead of just reading the textbook or reading your text. Okay, and then we'll talk about some common phrases that you can use. And then we talk about enhancing your speaking skills, right? Remember, playing sports, lexical approach, echo method, shadowing. And then we talk about some resources that you can use, okay? So that's pretty much it, okay? A summary. All right. So any questions, comments? We'll go to that question first. And you can think about if you have any questions or comments, okay? So about others' proficiency, yeah, that's an issue. I have actually the opposite situation in which the lower proficiency students complain about higher proficiency students because they speak too fast, and then they're sort of intimidated. They're sort of scared by their proficiency. I don't know. How did you deal with it? So yeah, I agree with you. Usually if I encounter that situation, I'll ask the more proficient students to help to help the less proficient students. And then probably I'll give the low proficient students more help probably, that I'll talk to them individually, and then I'll ask them to go to our tutor time or our faculty consultation, or ask them to do some, because for one of my classes I have a TA, and then I'll ask the TA to talk to the lower proficiency students. But still, in my teaching evaluation, there's still one student complaining about the class being too difficult, and he felt, I don't know, he or she felt a bit frustrated because most of the students in that class are really proficient speakers of English, and I speak English all the time, and then so I agree. It's a big problem. It's a big problem. It's very difficult. Probably can ask other speakers as well, but that's my opinion, or that's how I did. I'll give the lower proficiency students. Of course, we have to convince those high proficient students that, well, it's group work, it's collaborative. You can also learn something by teaching them, actually. But it depends on the students, I think. I agree. Thank you very much for your questions. Any other? Yes, Director Chen. Yeah. Okay, it's actually still unsolved. It's not a puzzle, but it's still a dispute. I would say originally I had that slide. Actually, that is the reasons why we do EMI. There are many reasons why we do EMI. Actually, can you think of? I think Professor Johansson will talk about that. But can you think of some reason in addition to increasing our students' English proficiency? Yes.
Okay. I'm quite curious about the president's response to that.
But my thinking is that, well, there are many reasons why we do EMI. One of the reasons is that we want to improve our students' English proficiency, right? Because we want to become a bilingual English-Chinese country in the future. That's only one of the reasons, actually. People also do EMI because we want to increase our internationalization degree. So you want to say something? But I also know presidents or officials who think that, well, if they come to our country, they need to speak our language. So it should not be like we accommodate them. We should not speak English in order to accommodate them. In contrast, they should accommodate to us because, but it's actually still an ongoing debate, and I think practically, doing EMI is the most efficient way to do it because, well, we at least speak some English, right? It's easier for us to switch to EMI instead of them speak Chinese in classes because it can be very difficult. My comment will be, well, there's more than one reason to do EMI, but we also need some flexibility when doing EMI because I think subject content is also very important. And I didn't mention this, but we all should think about this question. Why do we do EMI? Sometimes, for example, I was an English major and most of our courses were taught in English. That's because the content of the course was mostly English-based, like linguistics, etc. So they have to teach the subject this way. And if your purpose is to attract international students or to let them learn, to educate them, then probably EMI is the only way to do it, or the most efficient way to do it. So I think it's not nonsense. It's not unreasonable, but probably that's why we have this workshop, I think. We're trying to come up with some ways to ensure the quality of EMI, right? Because we know that it's probably unstoppable or it's a trend. So I think, and there's also some reasons other than improving our students' English ability. So I think, that would be my response. But I know it's still an ongoing debate. And also I think flexibility, as I said, flexibility. And what do you think? How did you respond? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, politically I agree with you very much. But again, that statement is also controversial in Taiwan because some people in Taiwan don't think that we have to rely on United States or like I think it's a political issue, but I totally agree with you actually from my personal perspective. And I agree. But one thing, students actually know that English is important. Actually, I have interviewed a few students. Some of them are overachievers and some of them are underachievers, and they all know the importance of English, but probably not in the sense that you're talking about, but they all know the English, but they cannot really sense it, I guess. They don't really sense the urgency, I guess, because most of them are like freshmen, first year or second year students. So, but I agree with it. That's a new way to look at it. And also it changes out the way we teach English or teach EMI courses. Yeah, but that's a whole lot of another issue. Yeah, okay, thank you very much for sharing. So I think, okay, so I'm sad. So any questions, you're welcome to stay and talk to me, okay? Thank you very much.